So today we're going to be talking about children through surrogacy. I have divided today's speech into 3 segments. The first segment is I'm going to share tips on how to tell your children and how children think about their unique beginnings. The second and middle part of my speech, we're going to talk about the biases in the media. And then I'm going to open up to my 2 lovely guests, Lily and Chase, and ask for them to share with us their opinions about the speech that I've given and the topic subjects that I've given. So, here we go. So, your surrogacy journey does not end when you have a baby. That's just the beginning of your journey, because these children are going to grow up, and these children are going to start asking you questions about where they came from. It's important to know that talking to your child about where your child came from is not a one-time speech. It's an ongoing speech that's going to start at one point, and it's going to keep on going through most of their life. It's also important when your children start asking you questions that you listen to the question that your child is asking and not assume you know what their question is. So how did I get out of your tummy is not the same thing as did I come out of your tummy? And children between the age of 3 and 6 tend to ask the question, how did I get out of your tummy? You have a choice at this time of telling them you didn't come out of mommy's tummy was broken. And a very special lady helped me. Or you have 2 daddies, we don't have a tummy that you could grow in, so a very special lady came along to help us. You can actually lay the foundation for future conversations you're going to have. Don't be afraid to talk to your children at these very young ages. They're not asking you about their genetics. Sperm donation was used or whether egg donation was used is irrelevant to the children at these very early ages. So this is the opportunity to introduce the idea of a surrogate mom. And you will have books you can share with her. You have your own photo album. I would recommend to all couples that they go to the mental health professional and get advice on how do I start answering my children's questions. As you are talking to your children about where they came from, your children are going to, in their heads, be asking themselves, does this mean I'm connected to you? Does this mean I will forever stay with you? Or does it mean that if daddy dies or mommy dies or my dad separate, that I'm not going to belong with you anymore? So as you are telling your children about the unique beginnings, it's very important to let them know, we are your family, we are your mommy and daddy, we are your mommy, we are your dads, and you belong to this family. Another thing as you're answering questions to your children is not to make the mistake of thinking that absolutely every question your child asks you is because they were born through assisted reproduction. So when your child looks at you and says, I absolutely hate you, it doesn't mean that they want to go back to their surrogate mom. When your child says, you're not my mommy and I wish you weren't my mommy and Ryan has a much better mommy than you, that's just normal teenage development often. So you are much benefited from understanding what is normal development, ART. So we asked a few children about what they think about surrogacy. And I'll get it for you. Okay. When did you first understand you were born with the assistance of a surrogate mom? And this is Morgan's answer. I don't really remember when I first understood how I was born. I just grew up knowing. Mom told me that whenever I asked her about it, she straight out just gave me the answer. And so after a while, I just knew. It was not a big thing to this child, and that's what we want for our children. They just somehow knew, and they're comfortable. And then we've got Matt. Ever since I was old enough to understand, as it was part of the conversation, it was just never a big deal. Do you think your knowledge that you were born through surrogacy has made a difference in your life? Morgan, yes. As a child, I felt different. Sometimes it was a special difference. Lily's answer to this was, I feel my parents went the extra mile to have me, and that means I was more wanted. And then, of course, we have Chase. People put a lot of time and effort into making me. I had lived my life the same way. I put more effort into everything I do. So the message here is telling your children about their unique beginnings is sometimes beneficial, and in fact all times beneficial to the children. They will take what they want from it, and they will understand that they were really, really wanted, and you went to a lot of effort to have them. So don't be afraid of telling your children. Do you think your parents were brave to do surrogacy? Was a question I asked many of the children. And Morgan's answer, it was their last option. I think they are brave to fight this long for me. If you don't tell your children about their unique beginnings and discuss it with them, you as a parent don't get the rewards of hearing your child say this about you. My parents always told me that it was important to follow your dreams and to never die wondering. Does this make them brave? My mom is not brave enough to go on a roller coaster, but she went through surrogacy to have a baby. And then I wanted to share a few things with you that I thought were very interesting about our program. CSP, Center for Surrogate Parenting, has been around now for 34 years. We recently had a young lady who was born as a child through surrogacy come to our program because she wanted to help the family have a baby, and she was going to be their surrogate mom. And we also have 5 surrogate moms in our programs whose mothers were surrogate moms in our programs. So we must be doing something right if the next generation is coming through. It also happens to age all of us. But surrogacy occurs around the world, as you all know, so not every couple has a child that's born in America through surrogacy. You might have gone to India, and there's many places in Africa, there's places in Taiwan, Russia, Ukraine. What's important is that your child will be growing up in an American culture. So how you raise your child is going to be in an American culture. So if you go to one of these countries and they do not allow you to meet your surrogate mom, and they don't allow you to know your surrogate mom's name, and they say you can never meet your surrogate mom after birth, you need to remember that your child is being brought up in the American culture. And to your child, getting access to this information is becoming more normalized in our society. In fact, we are promoting it as often as we possibly can promote it. So your surrogacy journey should not undermine the core values of the American culture. Don't make your child different, that yours is going to be the only child in the world, or in America, that has not met your surrogate mom. Try and avoid that on behalf of your children. Now we turn to what I call the bias in the media. And you've probably all seen these. Newsweek came out with womb for rent. There's a belly with a bar tag on it. Renting of a womb, bodies for sale, surrogacy is child abuse. And of course, we've got the latest one, which is a documentary, as they call it, called Breeders. And it's a documentary that's also got a title of A Subclass of Women. This is a documentary that came out and was brought out by the Center for Bioethics and Ethics. And quite frankly, I don't know where the ethics is in putting labels on our children. On the back, they talk about the products of surrogacy, as if these children sitting with me here are products of anything. They are human beings. I don't find anything ethical about this at all. But let me tell you about this video. And all of us need to be aware of this so we can start fighting the biases in media. What this video is really all about, this documentary, is 3 women who did surrogacy. They did surrogacy independently. That means there was no psychologist that they went to, there was no attorney they went to, there was no agency involved. One of the ladies did traditional surrogacy, and she chose traditional surrogacy because she didn't want to take all the hormones. But she was very surprised when she found out the baby she gave birth to looked like her. Well, perhaps if she had gone to a mental health professional, that would have been a subject that they discussed. And after she gave birth, her children said to her, we didn't know that we were related to this child. And her answer was, I never thought this would be an important thing. Had you gone and had a conversation with a mental health professional, this would have been discussed, and perhaps you wouldn't have been a surrogate mom, and perhaps this mess wouldn't have happened. Second case of surrogacy that's on this is a surrogate mom who was a surrogate mom the first time, and it was perfectly successful, had a great time. She came back and was a surrogate mom a second time for a couple she met online. And this time, she got pregnant very quickly, adored the couple. They didn't need to see a psychologist. And she even talks about the contract. She goes, we didn't sign a contract. Who needs a contract? We liked each other. Well, she goes ahead and gets pregnant and has a baby with severe birth defects. the couple ask her to terminate the pregnancy. And she looks at the couple and says, "What are you talking about? I'm a no termination surrogate mom. I don't believe in terminating under any conditions." So then she cuts off contact with the couple completely until she's almost 27 weeks pregnant, where you can't terminate anymore. And we're all wondering, why did this relationship between the couple and the surrogate mom end up in such a disaster? Why didn't they, at some stage, go to a mental health professional and see if someone could help them at least deal with the situation and talk it out? The third case is a surrogate mom who was a surrogate mom for her brothers, or her brother and her brother's partner, sorry. So it's a sister helping, which is a lovely thing to do, excepting for the fact she was never a surrogate mom herself. She had never given birth, sorry, she's not a surrogate mom, she had never given birth herself. This was her first pregnancy. And everyone in the field knows the cornerstone of surrogacy is you must have given birth. So had they gone to professionals, from the very beginning she wasn't eligible to be a surrogate mom. So what I think this documentary really is all about is this documentary is more about how surrogacy can go wrong when you cut corners. The other thing that makes me upset about this documentary is, what about the IVF doctors in this case? Those infertility doctors that allowed these 3 cases to go ahead without a psychological clearance, without any legal contract in place. Why did they allow that to happen? There's ASRM, American Society of Reproductive Medicine, gives guidelines to all of us in the field about things we need to do when we work with surrogate moms. And those 3 things are in there. You must have given birth, you need to go see a psychologist, and you need to have an attorney involved. So if these doctors had just stood up for the guidelines and said, "We're not going to help you unless you go and do these 3 things," none of these cases would have gone wrong, and these children would not be harmed, because they all gave birth to children that are part of this documentary, and they're going to see this documentary when they go up. So skipping steps leads to documentaries like this. I don't mind an open discussion about surrogacy. I think it's great. I think there's lots of things in our field that we can improve upon. We can improve every day. There's always things that we're doing wrong or we were unaware of. I don't mind criticism, but what I don't like is people coming along and putting labels on children. There was absolutely no reason to call this documentary breeders. There was no reason to refer to these children as products of surrogacy. That's just outright mean. So I think it's important that we look at society's attitudes of the stigmas we're putting upon our children, because the children have to live with this. And now that we have the internet, this documentary is up there forever. And these children are going to live with the outcome of these labels that we're putting on them. So we lived in a world once before where adoption was frowned upon, and we put all kinds of names on adoptive children and these wonderful birth mothers that gave birth to children and gave them better homes. And we stopped doing it at some stage. At some stage, we stopped putting labels on birth mothers and on adoptive children. And I think it's time that we stop putting labels on children of surrogacy as well. Freedom of speech is one thing, but there is the rights of innocent children involved here, and we need to find a balance. So I was going to open it up now to Chase and Lily. And Lily, your opinion about this documentary.
Well, first, I was born through surrogacy, child born through surrogacy through CSP. And first off, I've always known I was born through surrogacy. I get that question a lot, when was the first time that you were told you were born through surrogacy? And my mother created a story when I was young called The Night Before Lily. And she used to read to me every night and tell me, this is how you were born, and it's okay. And I think the most important thing for children born through surrogacy, from my perspective, is that they know that they are loved and that it's okay to be born this way, and that there's really no difference between me and yourselves out in the audience, just the fact that there was a different modality that I was born. And as for the movie Breeders, it's terrible. I don't appreciate being called a product, because I'm not a product, I'm a human being. And I don't appreciate the label breeder, because then I'm a product of a breeder. And when you label people in general, not just children born through surrogacy, but anyone with that kind of label, it presents a negative connotation. So if somebody was to go up to you in a conversation and say, "Oh, well, this child's from a breeder," right away you have a negative thought about me in your head. And so when you meet me, right away I'm already at a disadvantage, because somebody's already told you this is a child of a breeder. And now that it's out there on the internet, it's something that I'm going to have to deal with for the rest of my life. And, you know, I'm an older child born through surrogacy, so obviously it's not going to faze me as much. But for younger children who are being born through surrogacy, all it's going to do is give bullies one more reason to taunt these children. And as a child growing up, I was bullied. It mostly came from a religious standpoint, people not understanding, people asking me, well, why do you pay the surrogates? So basically you had to pay somebody to have you, and you know, that's true. Surrogates are compensated for their time just like any other business that you would see. And I guess my biggest problem with this is that it's not fair for children to be labeled in such a way, because it creates a stigma, and then it gives, you know, growing up is already hard enough, and I don't, you know, for every child, growing up is like the hardest part of your life, right? You have to deal with bullies, you have to deal with relationships, you have to deal with learning about yourself, and just to have one more thing on you saying like, oh, well, now you're a breeder, that just gives people the right to bully you and make fun of you. And these children had nothing to do with this process. I had nothing to do with this. I just am, you know. People chose to have me this way, but I had nothing to do with it. I was born, and here I am. So why do I have to take the brunt of this? And, you know, I think whoever created this documentary,
It's Jeanette Lal and Mark Epinet.
owes my brother and I, and all the other children born through surrogacy, an apology, because it's not right that she labeled us in this fashion. And for future generations, you know, I feel I'm saddened that it's come to this, because like Karen mentioned, I feel like society's already been through this once before with children born through adoption and labeling children like that, so why does it just keep happening? And I just, you know, I feel it's very unfair, and I was deeply hurt that this film was created, and at least with this title, because, you know, I feel that everybody has the right to their own opinion, but it doesn't mean that you get to label.
Thank you. And Chase, from a male perspective, you have a different view.
On the whole breeder title, it's just, you know, it's specifically created to have malicious intent. If you looked at me, I mean, if I sat in that chair, you would know. The only way you know I'm a surrogate child is because there's a tag under my name that says a child of surrogacy. I mean, I'm no different than anyone else when it comes to being a person. But to label me as a breeder child, it's just a malicious thing. I mean, when you hear breeder, you think of like, you know, like a farm. Like I wasn't born in some cage and like they let me out, you know. It's no ASPCA commercial where it's like you could save Chase for 10 cents a day. But, you know, to label me as a breeder is just, it's a mean, malicious thing. And to call yourself the ethics group, no ethics in it. I mean, it's just out there to be mean.
Yeah, what's ethical about that?
Yeah.
Nothing.
And with regards to you learning that you were born through surrogacy, what do you think about parents that, for example, will not want to tell their children, or say, what if I tell my children when they're more grown up and can understand? Lily first.
Oh, sorry. Don't do it. Don't do it, because then you've created a lie. And children will grow up and they'll say, why did you lie to me? What else did you lie to me about? And telling children from a very young age, like Chase and I, our mother told us in the form of a story. And just like Karen was saying, as a child, we asked very typical questions. Where did I come out from? Did I come out of your tummy or somebody else's tummy? You know, how was the process of birth? And right off the bat, you know, my mom took the opportunity, I'd like to point her out in the crowd right there, yeah. And to tell us, you know, right from the bat, and I appreciated that, because it made me feel like she went the extra mile to have me. You know, she didn't just, I mean, adoption is great, and I don't want to, you know, put any negative connotation on it, but the fact that she went out of her way to have a child in this manner, I thought she was very brave because she did that. And she was a pioneer in this field, actually. We're older, so I mean, we've been around for a while, and she telling us that we are important and that we are loved and that we are no different was really, really important.
And
take.
Chase, do you think we should tell them when they're
Yeah,
young, or does it
definitely
not
tell
matter?
when you're young, like they were saying, because otherwise you feel like your life's alive. You know, if you just find out something like, especially a big event like that, you'd be kind of thrown off. Your life would be different. You would, you know, wait, why didn't you tell me when I was younger? It makes you feel like, I mean, it would make me feel like I was, you know, different in a negative way. Yeah, I mean, definitely tell them when they're younger. Explain it.
You need to let children know that they're wanted is the biggest criteria.
And are there any questions in the audience? Otherwise, I can keep on asking them questions. But does anyone here have a question in particular they would like to ask? Okay. Then I will ask you the common questions, since we have time. Have you met your surrogate mom? Both of you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And how would you feel if you could never meet her? Do you think it would have really made a difference to you?
I wouldn't say. I mean, it would definitely have made a difference. Meeting my surrogate mom it's nice. I mean, we have dinner with her once or twice a year. She's a cool person. Not my mom. You know, I think my mom's the coolest person in the world. So, yeah, if I didn't meet her, I think it'd be weird. I have a wondering, like, oh, maybe I'm like her, because you know sometimes you and your parents butt heads, so you're like, oh, I'm different. You know, I'm not from her. I must be like my surrogate mom. And then you finally meet your surrogate mom, and you're like, okay, maybe the nature versus nurture thing's pretty big. It's who raises you, who you're like. It's not only genetics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I didn't have a really big yearning to meet my surrogate mother. I think the fact that I was told from the very, very beginning, just kind of like all those questions kind of went out the window, because it wasn't like I learned later on, and I was like, ooh, who is she? I wasn't as interested, but I have met her, and I couldn't agree more with Chase. You know, we're not alike, and I think it's just because, you know, we may look similar, but I think because I grew up in a different household, I'm much more like, you know, my mother who raised me.
And what about your friends and colleagues? Do you tend to tell them you're from surrogacy, or doesn't really come up in conversation? And those that do know, how have they commented?
So it's not one of those usual conversation things where they're like, so how were you born? But I mean, I'm proud. I'm proud of who I am, and surrogacy has given me confidence in who I am and being proud of who I am. So I mean, when it does come up, I'm not afraid to share it. When I was younger and by unfortunate circumstances, children found out that I was born through surrogacy, it was more or less a questioning, lots of questions. There were certain children that I was bullied from, and that's why this film really spoke to me, because I never want that to happen again for any child. And it usually came from a religious standpoint. Not really sure why that particular population decides to go that route, but that's what I've found mostly. And I've actually, the most negative comment I've received is actually from my ex-boyfriend's mother. She told me, oh, you should never have been born. You should never have been born. It's unnatural. You never should have been born, and that is a terrible thing to hear for anybody. And so those are some of the negative things that I've heard.
Yeah, like she says, it doesn't really come up that often, but when it does, usually, most people think it's cool, like, oh, how's it work? You know, they haven't really heard of it. But the people who think it's like a negative thing, usually those are pretty closed-minded people who I don't really care about in general. They're usually just people who start picking, trying to get you to have a reaction. But at the end of the day, like, I'm a person, you know, I'm not like half robot or something, some crazy thing of science. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't really come up that much. I'm not, you know, today I get to sit in front of you and talk because I'm a surrogate, but other than that, that's really the only perks of it. I don't get to go around getting anything from being a surrogate. I just get to talk to you guys. Other than that, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if there's no questions, I just want to say thank you to Lily and Chase for being here. Thank you very much. And for Matt and Morgan, who are all the way in Australia, who sent me their answers. And of course to Faye Johnson, who is the mother of these two delightful children, and what a great job she's done in raising them. And I know Hillary's not expecting this, but to Dr. Hilary Hannafin, she's the chief psychologist of our center and does all the matching. And really, without psychologists, mental health professionals, and especially Hilary Hannafin, this field would not exist. And real ethics come from people like Hilary Hannafin, and she's created these families. So we're forever thankful, Hilary. Thank you.